Hey guys, what's up? This is Byzantium aka Soulreed here, and I decided to make this video to rant about things that I think kind of hold Shulk back from being exactly viable in Smash 4. So as of me making this video, Shulk is ranked 38th out of 58 on the tier list, which pretty much means he's no longer bottom 15 or bottom 20 like he was before. This is actually the highest placing he's ever achieved on the tier list so far, which is mostly thanks to the fact that he has garnered pretty decent tournament results in 2016 and 17. Examples are M, who managed to beat Gluttony and Ice Stunning at Beast 7, placing third on what is pretty much the biggest European tournament, as well as Nico and Kome both managing to get out of pools and placing, I believe, both 33rd, which for 2GT Civil War is actually a huge accomplishment, because it's pretty much the most stacked and most difficult tournament, at least one of the most difficult tournaments in Smash 4's lifespan so far. Shulk actually did better at 2GT Civil War than a lot of C and B tier characters, even better than characters like Marth, for example, which really surprised me. So Shulk has gotten a lot more representation and more results, but even at his current placing he's on the verge of being low tier, so to speak. He's the third lowest ranking mid-tier character behind Link and Mr. Game & Watch. He still gets outperformed by 37 of the characters in the game. And unfortunately for Shulk, most sword fighters in the game perform significantly better than him. Examples are Cloud and Marth, which just completely destroy Shulk. Right now I would say Shulk is on par with Ike and Link in terms of results and viability, which makes him, together with them, the third worst sword fighter in the game, behind Roy and Me Sword Fighter, which I'm not even sure if you could consider Me Sword Fighter a sword character, because literally nobody plays as Me Sword Fighter. But and I just kind of wanted to talk about the reasons as to why I think Shulk is as low as he is. I wanted to discuss a few of his weaknesses, but a lot of his weaknesses actually have to do with what I consider bad design choices or actual programming errors made by the development team during Smash 4's lifespan, and things I think need to be addressed to make Shulk a more viable pick in both mid-level as well as high-level play, because Shulk pretty much is a rarity at tournaments right now. Even after the better results that he's got, he's still underrepresented, and it's really sad because I think Shulk could be a lot better than he is right now, and I still think he is better than 38th. I would say he is probably at the top of D tier right now, but that has to yet to be seen, just doesn't have the results right now. So most people, when they tie a weakness to Shulk, will immediately hammer on his frame data, and while Shulk's frame data is partly to blame for his low placing on the tier list and probably the reason he will never be a high tier character, but it's not necessarily like bad programming or bad design choices. For a lot of things it makes sense, for a lot of his moves it makes sense why his frame data is kind of bad. Obviously if Shulk had Cloud or Marth's frame data, he'd probably be broken. He'd just be a better version of Cloud essentially. And I don't think people would like to have a more OP Cloud, more OP version of Cloud in the game right now. So as of balancing reasons, it kind of makes sense why Shulk's attacks are slow. And it kind of makes sense in resemblance to Xenoblade Chronicles as well. So it's not necessarily his frame data that's totally to blame. Well, for the most part anyway. There are just a few. There are only a few moves that I would say currently that could be faster than this. But for the most part, it's actually not one of Shulk's most significant problems. For example, is forward air. It makes sense that forward air comes out as slow as it does. If Shulk had a forward air like that and it came out at like frame 6 or 7. That would just be notorious. I don't think it would hurt the metagame if like they made it maybe frame 12 or something instead of 14, but even frame 12 is still pretty slow. So another thing, for example, up tilt, being frame 11 is reasonable for how strong and how much range it has. Forward smash, actually really fast at frame 14 for how strong it is and how much range it has. Forward tilt frame 12 is pretty reasonable, I would say. Down tilt could maybe be a bit faster, like if you compare it to Ike's down tilt, which comes out at frame 7 and has almost as much range as Shulk's, but Shulk's comes out at frame 10. I think they could make Shulk's down tilt like frame 8 or at the most or something like that, and as well things like up smash and down smash. Being frame 19 is pretty alright, I guess. It's not fantastic, but it's a smash attack and it's pretty powerful, they're long ranged, so frame 19 is not that bad. So for the most part, I don't really mind Shulk's frame data being as slow as it is. There's just a few things that really annoy me that shouldn't be the way they are. There are a few moves which, like I said, I think should be a little bit faster than they are now, mostly for balancing reasons. They're not necessarily programming errors, they're just things that should be faster in order to make Shulk work the way he's supposed to work in terms of his metagame right now. Either in startup or in cooldown, in terms of startup or cooldown. And I guess I'll start with talking about the most important move in Shulk's moveset, arguably. And that move is Shulk's neutral air. Out of all the moves that I think should be considerably faster than it is right now, this is the most important one out of all of them, and the reason for that is because as of right now, neutral air comes out at frame 13 and is Shulk's fastest aerial attack. Like, just let that sink in. Shulk's fastest aerial attack comes out at frame 13. Now, most characters have an aerial attack that comes out between like frame 3 and frame 8. Like, pretty much every character has at least one combo breaker that lies within this spectrum of numbers, frame 3 to frame 8, while Shulk has nothing. And the reason this hurts him so much is because Shulk is pretty much the only character in the entire game that just doesn't have an aggressive option at any time if he gets comboed. When Shulk gets comboed by characters like Sheik or Mario, but he by default has one option less than all the other characters since he can't retaliate aggressively, and I don't think it's entirely fair to have Shulk be the only character in the game that has this problem. And even with Nair being at frame 13, Shulk's most reliable combo breaker right now is actually his forward air and not his neutral air. The reason for that is because the hitbox of Shulk's neutral air, it's kind of weird. It actually starts diagonally below and behind him, and it takes like 3 or 4 frames for the attack to actually kind of reach in front of him, which is where most aerial combos will hit you, while forward air usually starts to have the first hitbox in front of Shulk around frame 15 or 16, like 2 frames later than the initial startup. So basically characters can overextend their combos for 16 frames if Shulk attempts to retaliate aggressively against the opponent. I know that there are more characters that don't have like fantastic combo breaking moves, but they at least have something, while Shulk doesn't have anything at all. For Shulk, getting comboed or juggled is literally a choice between air dodge or jump. The player never has to be afraid of getting hit in these situations, especially if they have the frame data that Mario or Sheik have, or even Cloud for that matter, unless they really overextend their combos. So I think the most ideal scenario right now would be to make neutral air a lot faster. Like, maybe you have the initial starter be frame 7 or 8, so that like the front hitbox comes out around frame 10 or 11, because even at his neutral air, the initial starter being frame 7 or 8, is not going to make a huge difference in Shulk's overall gameplay. It's not going to make Shulk ridiculously overpowered, since the only other times you use neutral air is to maybe cover some options at the latch or to approach with, and since neutral air will still have 10 frames of landing lag and it still has ridiculously long ending lag, it's not going to give Shulk any more combos or something like that, and it's not like it's an extremely dangerous and fast KO move that you need to watch out for because it has pretty low knockback. If Nair would be frame 7 or 8, the only thing it would really help Shulk with considerably is the fact that he can interrupt combos more easily, which makes his disadvantage state a lot better than it is right now, because right now Shulk's disadvantage state while being stuck in a combo is pretty abysmal. He's pretty heavy, he's a very tall hurt box, so characters can kind of just hit him in the air, and Shulk, I mean, he has his jump part to get away, but it would be so much nicer for Shulk if you could just retaliate against the opponent more easily. It'll also make approaching for Shulk a little bit easier, and even at frame 7 or 8 it would still make neutral air pretty slow compared to most other combo breakers. For example, Corrin and Cloud have neutral airs that kind of resemble Shulk, but their neutral airs come out at frame 6, I'm pretty sure, something around frame 6, which means that even in comparison to them, being frame 7 or 8 for Shulk's neutral air would still be pretty slow. Especially since the rotation, the spin that Cloud and Corrin perform while using their neutral air is a lot faster than Shulk. So even the hitboxes that come out behind them and in front of them and things like that come out faster than for Shulk. And for the same reason, I would say maybe make forward air frame 12 to make it a little bit more easier to interrupt combos with and to space a bit more efficiently, but forward air in terms of startup doesn't bother me as much as neutral air, because even at frame 14 it still does its job properly most of the time. It's mainly Shulk's neutral air that I think needs to be faster. And speaking of neutral air, what is with that hitbox behind Shulk, Nintendo? Why does it not have a hitbox behind it? Shulk clearly swings the Monado behind him, and for some reason the hitbox just ends prematurely for no reason. Just please fix that. It just Cloud and Corny have neutral airs that hit behind them, and Shulk should have the same thing. There's no reason why the hitbox of Shulk's neutral air kind of stops above him when he swings it all the way behind him. It should just be a perfect 360. Yeah, that just kind of bothers me as well. Another attack that I think needs to be faster is down tilt. And actually, let me talk a little bit more about down tilt, because I think this move should be reworked entirely. Now, Shulk's down tilt is very similar, at least aesthetically, to Link's down tilt and Ike's down tilt, except it's much more inferior compared to Link's or Ike's down tilt. Now, frame data wise, Shulk's down tilt comes out at frame 10, which makes it one of his fastest attacks, ironically, and Link's down tilt comes out at frame 11, but has a little bit less cooldown. But the thing is, Link's down tilt is actually a very reliable combo tool, since at low percents, it can always combo into things like up air and forward air, unless the opponent de-ice perfectly, which is pretty hard to react to, since frame 11 is still too fast for most humans to perfectly react to. But Link's down tilt, even though it has a little bit less range than Shulk, it's still safe enough to be used as a spacing tool the way it is, since it deals more damage than Shulk. Shulk's down tilt only deals 7.5% if you space it perfectly, while Link's down tilt deals 11% through the entire move. And because Shulk's down tilt sends the opponent at an angle of 60 degrees, it is very easy for the opponent to escape from follow-ups, even without proper DI, while Link's down tilt has an angle of 80 degrees, which makes it much more difficult to DI. And on top of that, Shulk's down tilt already has more cooldown than Link, which Link's down tilt has 29 frames of cooldown, while Shulk's has 32, which makes it even more difficult for Shulk to follow up. So basically, Link's down tilt has slightly less range and 1 frame more startup, but since it has less cooldown, a better angle, and deals more damage, it remains an effective spacing move, pretty much on par with Shulk's down tilt, but Shulk doesn't gain any reward from down tilt, while Link does. Comparing Shulk's down tilt to Ike's down tilt shines even more light on how inferior Shulk's down tilt is as a move right now. Just like Link, Ike's down tilt has 29 frames of cooldown, as well as an angle of 80 degrees, and just like Link has almost as much range as Shulk, and deals 8% throughout, which is more than Shulk's down tilt when spaced properly, and on top of that it comes out as early as frame 7. Pretty much Ike's down tilt is Shulk's down tilt on steroids. So I think the best solution for Shulk's down tilt would be to keep the startup relatively the way it is. Like, maybe make it frame 8 or 9, but frame 10, like, it's not a huge deal if it stays at frame 10. Frame 8 or 9 would just be mostly for spacing reasons. It would be nice if it would be frame 8 or 9, but in terms of comboing, frame 10 is pretty alright. But make the cooldown 29 frames, just like Link and Ike, instead of 32. Remove the sour spot from the attack, because in general sour spots on Shulk attack is something that pisses me off a lot, because like there's not really any reason for Shulk's attacks to have sour spots. Comparing it to Ike, for example, Ike and Cloud actually both have almost as much range as Shulk in their attacks, except both Cloud and Ike have a much higher damage output than Shulk has right now, and they don't have sour spots at the tip of their sword, so I don't see why Shulk has to have sour spots. Now, in terms of knockback, it doesn't really bother me that much, because for killing you don't really need to space. It's mostly the damage output that really pisses me off, why it has to have sour spots at the tip of Shulk's sword, because it's even when you compare to Xenoblade, it makes no sense. There was no point in Xenoblade Chronicles where the tip of the Monado does less damage or anything like that. Like it literally is something that just nerfs Shulk for no reason. I believe even Zero referred to it in one of his videos. It shouldn't be. He shouldn't have sour spots on his beam, because it contradicts the way Shulk works as a character. you program Shulk basically to be a spacing character and to take advantage of his long range to space the opponent out and bait out reactions, but you make him have sour spots on the tip of his sword so that his attacks are less safe on block, which it's kind of the same problem Roy suffers from, except Roy is more of an aggressive character, and Roy makes up for it with his fantastic frame data, while Shulk's frame data is obviously abysmal. So in general I think sour spots have to go, but Downfield especially, because it's one of Shulk's main spacing tools on the ground, so the move should just deal 9.5% damage throughout. As well as give it an angle of maybe about 75 degrees or so that you at least get a little bit of a reward out of hitting your opponent, because right now you don't get anything out of Downfield except the fact that you hit your opponent and you get 7.5 damage on them. You know, there should be more to it. Shulk should get a reward for properly spacing his attacks. It's like Nintendo purposely programmed it so that a lot of his attacks work against him. So yeah, Shulk's down tilt should be a little more like Link's or Ike's, so that you at least get a little bit of a reward out of hitting the opponent, and it should be safer, a lot safer on block as it is right now. I know you have Buster Art and things like that to make it safer, but still, you should always have to have Buster Art in order to space properly. You should be able to, Shulk should be able to space more safely with the attack, even without Buster Art. The next move I want to talk about is back air. Now, I know even people that don't play Shulk know that Shulk's back air, for the most part, is already a fantastic move, even though it's slow, and for the most part it is, but I still think there are a couple of things that need to be addressed. So, back air comes out at frame 18, which sounds really slow, and it is, especially since you often hit the opponents with the frame 19 or 20 hitbox. But I don't think back air needs to be a lot faster than it is right now, maybe frame 16 or 17 at the most, maybe shave 1 or 2 frames of startup. But like with forward air, it does its job properly most of the time. There are actually 2 or possibly 3 other important things that need to be addressed for this attack, and I think that need to be removed entirely or at least buffed significantly. The first thing is something that bothers me to no end about this attack, and that is the sour spot, which is the tip of the Monado's beam as he pokes it behind him, dealing much less damage than the blade of the attack. Now, the thing about back air is that it's arguably Shulk's most important spacing move, and as such, its damage output is very important, because the more damage the attack does, the more shield pressure it does, and which in turn makes it more safe on shield. But the thing is, Shulk's back air actually only does 8.5% damage if you space it properly, and since most of the time while spacing in the neutral with the attack you would probably be in speed art, since it's Shulk's best art in the neutral, it deals 0.8 times 8.5 damage, which means that with the damage multiplier applied, it only deals 6.8% damage in speed art, which against many faster characters such as Fox or Sheik or Meta Knight simply isn't enough. It's not safe enough against a lot of these characters. So I think back air's damage output should be increased to be at the very least 10.5% at all times, even with speed art, which is why I would say to just remove the damage decrease entirely. The knockback isn't as big of a deal, like it's really the damage of the move that should be higher, because Shulk already suffers 19 frames of landing lag with the attack, and it makes sense that it should be unsafe up close, but thanks to speed art's damage decrease of 0.8 and the move only doing 8.5% damage at the sour spot in vanilla form, combined with 19 frames of landing lag, simply doesn't make the move as safe as it should be, and therefore makes it punishable for a lot of characters, even if you space it properly, and unless you Monado Art landing lag cancel it. But you know, you can't just keep switching Monado Art forever, since it becomes obvious for the opponent. So I would say make Shulk's back air sour spot deal at least 10% damage at all times, and maybe shave 1 or 2 frames of landing lag, like give it 17 or 18 frames of landing lag instead of 19. This decrease in landing lag would still make it punishable if not spaced properly. It just makes it a much more safe spacing option than it is right now, which is important because, as I said before, it's Shulk's most important spacing tool to begin with. And the last thing that I think is flat out unacceptable, and I have no idea why Nintendo programmed it that way, is that the auto cancel window for back air is flat out disgusting. Not only does it hurt Shulk way more than it should, but it makes absolutely no sense visually, and and I have no idea who in their right mind programmed it this way. It's disgusting. As you can see, Shulk puts the Monado on his back at frame 58 after the attack finishes, but he continues to have landing lag until frame 79 after the move finishes. And basically what this means is that 21 frames after Shulk has already put the Monado on his back, it will magically teleport back into his hands, experiencing full landing lag. Like, my mind just can't get to why they decided to design it this way. I don't know what crack they were smoking. It's unacceptable, and I have no idea how this made it past Nintendo's balance patches. It needs to be fixed as soon as possible. Shulk should not experience landing lag after frame 58 for no reason. And the thing is that all of Shulk's aerials suffer from this weird problem where their auto-cancel windows don't make any sense whatsoever. Shulk is also the only character who cannot auto-cancel any of his aerials during their startup or ending frames whatsoever. And again, it just makes no sense why Shulk has to be the only character with this problem. Just like with the lack of having a combo interrupter, it's unfair that Shulk is the only character out of the 58 characters with this problem. And it just feels like a design flaw. Forder has the same problem where Shulk puts the Monado on his back at frame 55, but auto-cancel window starts at frame 57. Shulk's neutral air has Shulk put the Monado on his back at frame 65, but for some reason he can't act out of the move until frame 71 and experiences landing lag until frame 80. Shulk's up air makes Shulk put the Monado on his back at frame 64, but experiences landing lag until frame 79. And down air makes him let go of the Monado at frame 64, but he has landing lag until frame 78. All of these auto-cancel windows make no sense and should be fixed in my opinion. But back air suffers the most out of all of these, since it's Shulk's compared to all of the other attacks. Neutral air only has 10 frames of landing lag anyway, and up and down air aren't as useful in the neutral or to approach with. And forward air, it's only 2 frames, which isn't that big of a deal. But still, I think all of them should be fixed, because it's literally a design flaw in my opinion, not even a balancing issue, it's just something that shouldn't be there. But back air is the most important one out of all of them. Well, that's pretty much it when it comes to things that bother me and things I think hold Shulk back from being viable. I know that there are a few other problems, like some of his multi-hit attacks don't link into each other as well as they should. Most of the time this isn't really anything game breaking, like it's annoying at most. Forward smash, it happens especially with lighter characters and if you aim it upwards. But if you aim it downwards for that matter, most of the time if you don't angle forward smash it works properly. They can sometimes fall out of it, but they should just decrease the SDI multiplier for that one and should work properly. Up smash, kind of the same thing. People sometimes fall out of it, which doesn't really have anything to do with SDI as much. It more so has to do with up smash has this unique property where there are hitboxes on the ground right next to Shulk, and if the opponent gets hit by them, they kind of they fly upwards into the second hit. But if you DI away from Shulk, they can escape the second hit, which is annoying sometimes, but it rarely happens. Like unless the opponent is already somehow holding the control stick in a specific direction, but it doesn't really happen as much that I would consider it problematic for Shulk's viability. The only thing that I do think is problematic is up air, which opponents often fall out of it, which shouldn't happen. For this one, they could just apply the auto link angle. What the auto link angle is it's basically an angle which is used for specific attacks like Fox's forward air and Mario's up special to drag opponents along with their momentum. The thing is, with Shulk, oftentimes when you hit opponents with the first hit of up air, if you have some sort of momentum, like with jump art and speed art, opponents often fall out of the first hit because they don't get dragged along with Shulk, and that's something that I don't understand. They should apply the auto link angle for that move to ensure that your opponent will always get hit by the second hit. But other than that, there's not really anything major. Like there are few things like ledge attack is kind of has a weird hitbox. Backslash has a weird hitbox sometimes, but those aren't really like major issues or anything. Most of the major issues have to do with some of Shulk's attacks either not being rewarding enough or not safe enough, and that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss regarding Shulk, and I hope you guys found this interesting and helpful. And who knows, maybe when Smash for the Switch comes out, which I really hope they're going to announce at E3 this year, maybe we'll see some more buffs. Who knows? Nintendo is unpredictable, so we'll just have to wait and see. And until then, happy smashing everyone, and I'll see you guys in another video.